G'day, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, we have an interesting episode to unpack. I have two of the regular favourites in the studio with me, Mr. Big Jimmy Ibrahim. Mate,
G'day.
welcome back to the show.
G'day, Sammy. G'day, listeners. Great to be back,
Mate,
as always.
Great to have you back, mate. You still got the jumper on. You're still repping the Australian Property Scout hoodie, mate. How's it going for you?
Mate, you know, I run a little bit
Do you
colder.
run? You don't run.
Just because my skin folds are a bit less than yours. So I do get...
The definition there is skin folds? I don't have them, bro.
I do get a bit
I don't know.
colder. So I thought I'd represent with the black. But one thing that stood out to me, Sammy boy, is normally you and I wear black.
Yes.
But our other co-host usually has a bit of a colour.
He has a bit of flair.
Yeah, sometimes salmon.
Yes.
Sometimes a bit of a lime green.
Yes.
But
Sometimes a canary
curious.
yellow.
I'm
But
curious.
today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Luke Teeuwsen back, and he is in black.
Yeah.
He's back in black.
What happened?
My soul's been darkened by dealing with you two.
Too much time around us.
I
Too
used
many kebabs and baklava.
I used to try and bring some colour. I used to say rose between two thorns, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Got too much shit, so we're moving on. We're darkened.
He's got the black and white going really well there with the old skin color next to the.
Because I know Talia normally.
He's like, what are you talking?
I was like, what is he talking about? Then I realised I'm pasty white.
But Talia normally does dress you. So did you pick this or did she?
Nah, I picked this. If
Okay.
she was picking, I'd probably be in a bit of colour.
All right. Well, we might let Lukey continue to pick his wardrobe. No offense, Talia.
Yeah. You do look good, Lukey.
You're looking good. You're looking good. Boys, I'm excited to discuss today's episode because last month we did the episode around all about units because we kept getting those Q&A, all those questions sent in around units, and we unpacked a few things around that, you and I, Jimmy. But then we had even more questions sent in around it because obviously price points changing. The field is getting a little bit different out there in the Australian property market from a price point perspective, and days are pretty much gone of the sub $300,000 purchase prices for houses in any sort of decent location around Australia. So as a result, we had a lot of people writing in, asking a lot of different questions. But one of the biggest things we kept getting asked was, how much do you need to get started investing in property? So I wanted to unpack that today, guys. I think this is going to be a bit more of a punchier episode than normal, but I think we dissect in terms of what sort of price points we're seeing as the real bottom end that we can get into today in today's marketplace. Obviously, the primary focus, if we can get, is always around the housing side of things, but units are coming back into the fray because their affordability and their price point, they are seeing good growth. And for some investors, they may be, a decent option to kind of start with to get the foot on the ladder and get started. But I wanted to discuss it with you boys, all these sort of, talking points around this and the things that people should be looking at when they're looking to get started and how much they might need. So Lukey, mate, I know obviously you deal with a lot of the clients as well. What do you typically recommend to people coming through, kicking off, starting us off, mate?
Yeah, it's definitely a question we get a lot. What's the minimum? There's a lot of different variables that come into actually how much you need.
Yes.
Obviously one really important thing is the loan to value ratio at which you're actually going to purchase. Are you someone that really wants to avoid something like lender's mortgage insurance and you want to do an 80% LVR? Probably not something we'd really recommend for someone really starting out.
Some people need to start with a 20% deposit though, depending on their circumstances as well. So I agree with you, man, completely. It always comes down to the individual circumstance, right?
Can you just explain why someone might, just for someone listening, why would they?
So there can be a lot of different reasons. Like if someone's expats, so if someone's from overseas and they're using a specific lender in Australia to be able to get the borrowing, typically they're seen as a riskier lender. Or it's almost always comes down to risk, right? But that they may need to do, they can still typically get a loan, but it's normally at an 80% LVR, loan to value ratio. So they need to come up with that 20% deposit on the house to actually be able to purchase it and move forward, plus closing costs, right? So the other things are people like potentially business owners or different things. A lot of the time, low doc lending, things like that, it's when people are in a little bit of a higher risk position and potentially your mainstream lenders or just all lenders will look at it and go, yeah, no worries, we'll lend to you, but you're in a riskier sort of scenario right now. So we're going to drop the loan to value ratio, which is going to drop our risk ability. Also, a lot of mortgage insurance providers may not actually lend to those guys, approve to them as well. So that can also be a deciding factor.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, or like family and friends, oh, you just need a 10% deposit, you pay LMI. Not in every case. You know, there are plenty of people that aren't eligible for LMI or can't get it due to some risky situations, or, you know, entrepreneurs that have only just started in business. You got to go low doc or someone with a bit more risk appetite.
And then on that flip side as well, you might get the family and friends saying you need the 20% deposit, not understanding, you know, or embracing LMI. I've been around this heaps where people I knew personally, just they wanted to save for that 20% deposit, and they could see the market outstripping them from that perspective as well. Even though I tried to give them a bit of advice around, you know, getting in earlier with your 10, 12% deposits, but they were trying to save for the big one. And yeah, this is one of the big things where you see people run into a bit of trouble here of taking too long to save that first deposit, and a market outpacing them, trying to save that 20% as opposed to say your 10%. From that side, so but there's obviously costs and different things associated with it, but it's all part of the journey, you know, cost of doing business.
Absolutely. And then you also have, like, when you go and throw into the fold, you know, family guarantors, you know, so technically, you know, no deposit down to a degree, and you cover closings, or, you know, some banks will actually let you include closings in your loan and do 105 or 100% LVR. Obviously, you know, you're taking on 105 or 107% debt of the property, so the property would be expected to be quite negative. But that's a way you can actually get into a property without technically any deposit down from yourself. So,
and if we look back at, I remember Jason's episode, right? So Jason Titus, BA at APS, when we did his investor story last year, that was how he got his foot in the door. His parents were going to go guarantor for one property for his brother and one property for him, and that was his only way to get in. He was starting from a very low base, got a young family, you know, his wife and his two girls, and the only way he could get in without, you know, waiting 6 months and building up 6 or 12 months to build up his first deposit was that family guarantor to begin with. And sometimes it can be a really good way to kind of get started if you're really at a standing start, but maybe you got, you know, a good job, you're in a good position, but you just don't have that deposit yet. It can be a good way if the option is able to get in on the first deal. Because I know Jace, I think within 6 months or maybe within 3 months he'd refied them off, and then another 6 months post that he was actually pulling a deposit back out of that deal. So he got them the parents off as the guarantor, and then had enough equity in there even beyond that to then be able to strip that out and buy another property.
The guarantor thing,
pretty cool.
Have we done a podcast on that, or is that more School of Property stuff?
I think we did. I actually think we did do one with Jace from memory.
I think we touched on it. I think it's quite an interesting thing, the whole guarantor thing, because if that's your only option, it'd be great to give people a bit more context around that, because there's a lot of pitfalls from both sides, from the guarantor and obviously the guarantee. Is that what you would call them?
Yeah. So there's a big crackdown on it too. You know, they actually have like an independent appointment with the guarantor now. You know, so there's no things like elder abuse and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important.
So yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, years ago, you know, you could pretty much just do it, and there wasn't really
sign here, Mum.
Yeah, well, yeah, or if they signed it all. So, yeah, it's definitely been cracked down on, but it's definitely a useful thing for a lot of people.
So if we dive back to the actual root cause, or like exactly why we are here on this poddy, right? If we're talking about how much you need to get started investing in property, that's your no money down strategy, right? It's effectively being able to get in, let's say, with nothing. But if we were to flip the script and looked at, okay, well, 95% of people don't have that opportunity, that ability, right? So if we're looking outside of that, you know, what are the other, how much do you need, Lukey, at the moment, or even Jimmy, like what are you telling people as they're sort of coming through the door as well, that they're needing to buy their first property?
Well, I would actually, if I can spin that back to you, Sammy, because my question would have been, if we're talking units or an option or a good quality unit compared to a house, what the variance between the two, should we break it down as to what the differences would be to get into the market?
Yeah, and I think this is where the people now who kind of have that like 60,000 or less, this is kind of the environment that they're pretty much needing to move into now, like looking at the unit as the first purchase. And like that episode that we did last month, everything has to stack up from the market fundamentally to still make sense from a growth perspective. But realistically, like if they can pick up a deal and realistically, even if they just make $100,000 on it in the next couple of years as an uplift, but that might get them into 2 other properties and then they might sell out of it or whatever, 150, whatever. If that's all it does, then it served its purpose, you know, and it's enabled us to leverage into a different housing market. But realistically, that sub $300,000 price point right now, it's virtually impossible for a house. And we're telling that to people, you know, you see, you'll be doing that on the front end. Yeah, it's impossible possible now to be able to buy that. And the clients we already have on the books that are in waiting for that product, we're not taking anyone else on from that perspective for that because it's just too hard to find and if at all. So when we're looking at units, that's where, again, it really comes down to the price point. Like typically a purchase price around the low to mid 200,000s, you're needing about 50 to 55-ish sort of thousand. When you start stretching into the high 200s, you're needing around about that kind of 60 to 65,000. And then if you're going over 300, where we still can, or the occasional deals from that end up to the 350s, you're needing around about 70, 75K from that side. At an 88% lens, so it's 12% deposit, plus stamp duties, BA fees, closing costs, all that sort of stuff as well to kind of get you in and fully get in on that deal as well.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty, like 70, 75 for a sub 350 deal. Like, let's assume you do an 88% LVR after 350 property. 12% deposit on 350 is 42,000. So 42,000 is your deposit on property. You then got to add stamps, lender's mortgage insurance, BA fee, closing, but you're using BA usually, and that's going to lead you around that 70 mark.
Yeah.
We always usually like to build in a bit of a maintenance buffer for most clients, and that more so protects the clients than anyone else.
Yeah. Then one thing I'll sound at as well, right? Because like it's one of these things where I've had this conversation with a few people before, and like, is it worth spending the money on a BA fee when you're a first time on and you're scraping the barrel? And I think it's a really, really valid point. It's something I've thought a lot about because I've always been like, I always want to try and empower the younger, obviously the younger, everyone, right? But especially the younger generation. I don't want to be hitting them up with a fee if they're not getting the great value out of it. And I think the first property, you guys have heard me say this with so many podcasts, the first property is the most important one. If you make a mistake on the first one, you go run into some serious strife in your portfolio. You might completely stagnate. So I think the really key thing here is like if you're working with a buyer's agent to help you source that first property, even though, yes, it will add to your cost base, they should be making that feedback as a minimum on the purchase price on the way. So you're actually not at a negative position buying that deal where you might come unstuck. Because if you go buy one of those deals and you're paying market value or above for it plus the BA fee, you might be 30 grand, 20, 30 grand in the hole, depending on the BA fee, how much you might have paid above or whatever as well. That's where you're going to get caught out and come unstuck. Whereas instead, if you are making sure that you're working with a good reputable BA, they're buying a property at the right price, you're getting the discount, cover the BA fee on the way in, and then also buying the right growth location, or maybe having some levers we can pull. Yeah, let's say in the right growth location does a little bit of run, and then in 6 to 12 months, we've also got some levers we can pull to force some additional value on it. These are the sorts of things that like a great BA will actually be able to help you outperform having a crack doing it yourself, is trying to stake the money. But I can understand the logic and the perceived logical trying to save yourself that on that front. But realistically, like right now, trying to get out there and source yourself and buy a property, like the market is so hard to source in. If you're a novice and you're working against a 10, 20-year veteran, they're going to eat you up for breakfast and you're going to be paying top dollar trying to buy this thing yourself as well. We see other BAs get eaten up for breakfast and paying top dollar or above market for this sort of stuff as well. So like understanding the market value, not making the mistake on it, I would warrant, like I honestly believe the most important transaction to do with a buyer's agent as an absolute minimum is the first one, so you don't do your dough and buy in the wrong location, buy the top of the market, overpay for a property, all this sort of stuff.
The self-awareness piece, I think it's really screams out with what you're talking about, Sammy. If you did go out on your own, you just really need to be honest with yourself. Do you have the knowledge to execute this? And have you done the due diligence? Have you done all the research? How confident are you? Because yes, you might save the BA fee, but the opportunity cost of what the flow and effect of money is can be astronomical. You get it wrong and you're out. It might not be astronomical, that might be a bit dramatic, but at least for a couple of years, that I lost the income.
I agree with you. It could be astronomical. You buy in the wrong market, you buy past the peak. Let's say it took you 3 years to save you 70 grand. Or 50, let's say you did it without a DA, 50, 55, 60 grand or whatever, the difference. And then you've gone and spent that and you bought in the wrong market or you bought at the top or you overpay even as the market was peaking out and then it's come back or whatever. It is astronomical. Yes, stopped and then going to stay for another 3 years. So it is, hence why it literally is the most important one to get right, to set you up to keep moving forward. So, yeah, man, I think it's really, really important. And there's many people that go out there and have a crack. I have no issues with that from that perspective if they want to, but I would say to really, really take your time, do your due diligence, and don't have that false sense of bravado that you know what you're doing straight away. Take your time with it, because market value genuinely takes quite a bit of time to understand both what's transacting on market, off market, what's selling, how quickly a market is moving as well. We sit between 91 to 96% is our average month of off markets.
So for anyone listening out here to do it on their own, and some people ask me, well, why don't you do it on your own? I'm like, well, if the team is buying off market to take the heat out of the transaction, to get great quality stock, and they're running at a 90+%, why would a real estate agent in any market present it to you, the retail investor, for one deal?
They've generally like I say this to clients all the time when they ask that sort of question. If we're doing 90% off market, there's obviously 10% that are on market, but they're generally a really good opportunity, and there's reasons for that, or it's just been listed after you've already secured it, those sort of things. But it's just not possible for the retail investor to buy the same properties that we do. You never get access to it, and you're never going to see it on realestate.com or Domain. If you're getting, as a retail investor, an off-market property, not just us pass on it, there's other people that pass on it too. You might have 10, 20 plus people that have passed on that deal before it's brought to you. And it's an off-market deal because they don't want to take it to market, but it's been passed on for a number of reasons that you don't know about. And you got brought a deal and go, oh my God, this is my first off-market deal. I've got a banger. Not the case.
Yeah, so don't think all off-market deals are great deals, and don't think all on-market deals are bad deals. There's good and bad in both.
But this is where it all comes down to understanding the market. And that's why I said, you got to spend legitimate time becoming a market
expert on this stuff.
Because if you're not getting on the ground, you don't actually know where you're buying, what you're buying, and what you might run into from that perspective as well. Because something might seem cheap could actually be expensive or market value or above it, because it's in a different pocket to where some other sales are as well. So I think it's ridiculously important. And literally almost all markets in Australia these days that are worth investing in, there's a couple that are very early that are outside of this parameter. There are almost all other locations. There are a lot of buyers agents active in and around there, right? And there'll be agents that will they like to sell quick and easy, and then there's agents that like to sell, just try and get top dollar, and they'll deal with a painful BA or whoever and get that top dollar from that front. Well, you got to understand, like we said, is almost every deal is passed through the hands of someone else and being rejected before it gets into market. So I understand that you are paying that retail money, and I don't care how much research or how many courses or whatever anyone's done to think that they can get the better. Exactly like you said there. Nobody's going to sell off market to you at a great deal for doing one deal in an area. Where is there incentive to do that? Like there literally is no incentive to do that. You're not going to get the screamer off market from that perspective. Is there going to be something wrong with it? Or it's going to be above market or market value, So it's man, it's just a fact of life now. Like we've spoken about before, market dynamic has changed from when I started. And I'm fully aware of that from that perspective. If I was out there trying to do it now, compared to when I was heavily accumulating 7-8 years ago for the middle phase of my portfolio, it would be a much different. I think it would probably be a much different portfolio because I wouldn't be able to secure the sort of prices that I was at the time. So, and the discounts that I was at the time, which was so crucial to my portfolio growth.
If you think about time, if you're going to do the research on your own, and as you said, get on the ground and do that, there's a significant amount of time. Then you got to weigh out how much money am I saving, but how long is it going to take me to actually do this well.
Let's move past the BA sign, because the idea of this wasn't to talk about why first-time buyers. But it's important, right? It is, and that's why we obviously put a bit of time into it. But it's not while we're on this thing. So if we kind of move past, and just to recap, guys, obviously what we're talking about there is predominantly if we're looking at units, we're kind of looking in that low twos. Let's even call that low to mid twos to low to mid threes. If there's good value around there, and if you're looking at other markets. Or if you're looking in a specific market where the house prices are maybe at like 500,000-600,000, but you can see good value and there isn't an oversupply of maybe a unit or a duplex or a townhouse or something at maybe 350 or something, and you can see there's that gap and you understand how to work the metric around that, then that's where there can be some opportunity. And sometimes that stretches into we did a deal just last week that was a $430,000, $25,000, $30,000 unit or something like that. The market value on it was $490. And it was or 480 or something like that. It was a no-brainer. Whatever it was, it had 40 grand in it. Even though it was a unit, it still had a lot of merit and promise to still do that deal. So, and I think, and that market was pacing so hard, growing so fast that the market was still going to produce from a unit perspective. It was in there for a specific purpose, and yeah, man, I think it's important to note that right now in this market, there's opportunities around it. But then if we also look at the house price, the minimum sort of house price we're looking at, like I was saying here, it's kind of around 350 to 400. Like, yes, we are still doing some deals sub 350, but there's so few or far between. They're so scarce that really, like most people would tell, like 350 to 400 is really pretty much that bottom end. And then starting to press into the fours. But yeah, if your first deal you're coming through, you're kind of looking around those mid threes sort of money.
Are we looking at regional for both anyone who's looking at not buying?
There's nowhere in Australia you can buy metro for that money. Correct.
They're just to frame their expectations. Yeah, with the unit and or.
There's some dodgy pockets. So you could probably buy a unit for the mid 300s. There's some good markets where you can buy for like in the fours. But again, it would have to be really warranted for us to kind of assign that and to actually genuinely look at it. Have to be really clean, really good discount and everything from that side. Yeah, when we're talking, that's when we're talking capital cities. But yeah, man, regional wise, and by the way, like the way that I look at it now as well, so many capital cities have had so much run. A lot of the best capital growth markets are out there in Australia. Are really strong regional markets. So there's still some metro markets that I believe had good run left in the day. But yeah, and especially if we're talking like mid threes or even realistically, you can't buy almost. There's no real locations left in metro Australia capital cities that are worth buying in at that sort of money for sub 500,000. Like it's almost impossible now to get a good quality property in a good suburb. Sub 500 grand in a capital city.
No, I think what I was going to sort of transition it back to is actually sort of what we were intending on talking about is how much is it? Obviously we talked about the guarantor method and no money down. That's not an option for everyone. Obviously we talked about 80% being an option for some people.
Yeah, if we go
into let's say we used the example before of a 12%
deposit on 350, need
42 grand, around 70 grand total if you're using a BA.
Yeah.
Now, if you're then one of those people we talked about earlier that, the risk tolerance from a bank is a bit lower because there's things there that, aren't the normal, and you need a 20% deposit, 20% on 350, 70. So you're kind of looking at with stamps, closing costs, etc., BA fee, if you're using one, around 100. So the difference between the 88% and the 80% LVR can sometimes be 30 or 40 grand, even at that lower end of the market. So that's a key thing to understand.
And just recently, 95% lends have come back into the mix as well, which we haven't seen for ages. They're not something that we would normally push. Like if people can avoid doing it, then we would normally would push to kind of avoid doing it because the LMI at that ratio just goes crazy. As soon as you go above 90% LVR, your lender's mortgage insurance gets extremely expensive. But if you were dead set on a house and it was capital that was stopping you, not serviceability, and you're willing to pay the higher LMI, then for the same sort of property, you maybe getting in for 50K instead of the 70K because you're able to obviously save that deposit piece as well. So yeah, man, there's always different sort of metrics and ways to run this thing in ratios, but yeah, that would be really scraped within like 95% lens, which isn't open to everyone, but the opportunities are there.
Person listening here that's super hungry and they're saying, all right, Sammy, I understand. Yes, I'll pay more in Allen White. Let's just say I'm paying an extra, or even 10. Yeah. Right. But I can get into this market and this is going to be an incredible growth market. Then using opportunity cost as the metric, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
100%. Opportunity, like cost of doing business, man. Like effectively, if you were going to take another 12 months to get into the marketplace, like we look at $10,000, which it wouldn't be that much more. It'd be maybe like, I don't even think it'd be $5,000 more of LMI. I don't know exactly the ratios of 90 to 95% LVR. And then lenders and mortgage insurance would be involved with that, but I don't think it'd be $5,000. Let's say it's $5,000. There's no way that any of the locations we're buying in Australia right now at 350 in the next 12 months aren't going to go for $1,000,000. Okay. So if you look at that metric, that's $50,000 worth of growth compared to the $5,000 extra in the LMI that you were going to spend anyway at the 10x return on that, an additional $5,000. So again, it's a no-brainer. What if that 50 is actually $100,000 in growth? And looking at it from that perspective, man, this is where if you really want to do it, and that's the way you have to get in, then man, that's the decision you make.
So when you said before that you wouldn't normally advise it, that just the certain circumstances.
If you didn't have to do it. Because it's very expensive, man. Like I did a bit of 95s when I was younger because that's sort of like I was scraping the barrel, man. And when I was in my early mid-20s, I was scraping the barrel. And I had to do 95% lens to go to that next phase and to buy what I wanted to buy. And yeah, man, you just get slugged with a higher LMI, but it was what I needed to get in. And the properties I bought back then, have like tripled in the time frame since I've owned them as well. So it's paid off, and it is what it is. And A couple of years later, I was able to refi them back down to, they had so much growth, I was able to refi them back down to for 80%, drop my actual interest rate and then refi some equity back out and happy days, man, keep going. So
it's always looking at it as a cost of doing business.
And if you're capped at a certain amount and maybe you don't like the idea of buying units, which I'm fine if people don't like the idea of buying units, it's okay, can we look at a 95% lend instead and go down the investment part, buy a house at 350 instead of a unit at 250 because capital is an issue, not serviceability. And this is where people just need to weigh up the situations of what they're comfortable with and then what's open to them and go from. But I think that's a good sort of cap.
Obviously talking about deposit amounts.
If we move on to the next thing, which I think is really important, something I wanted to touch on about this as well, is talking about maintenance buffers, okay? And like a lot of people maybe not factoring them into numbers, go, well, they're 50 grand's worth of deposits.
I just want to go buy a property for, 50 grand and max this thing out.
And they buy it and they're like, shit, I'm actually, like, that's me going to the limit.
Which we always discuss in strategy sessions.
We always question, like, how much of a buffer have you got sitting there? When it comes to maintenance buffers, it's something when we send out as a deal, we always include a maintenance buffer in every deal that we send out. So we factor it into your numbers. So those numbers, Luke, you saw out before, bloody steadily to 75. We factored the maintenance buffer into those numbers as to what you need. But what are your boys' opinions on
buffers? And I'd even be intrigued
to know how you guys have ranked your portfolios before with both buffers and maintenance buffers and
kind of building the portfolio out.
Well, from my side, Sammy, I've generally followed your train of thought from, I think you're from memory, 5 grand per property until you hit 20 grand and then you had a 20 grand buffer. I think it comes down to the security you have in your income and your expenses and your business. So for me, fortunately enough in my business, with the income that's coming in, I don't necessarily allocate a buffer per se because I've got the capital
there, even though there is a buffer there.
But I think what your metric was pretty bang on. And I find people create too much of a buffer. They say, I'm going to keep 75 grand as a buffer. I'm like,
what are you doing? What are you doing with the 75 grand?
I just want to be comfortable just in case.
Yeah. What could it possibly happen that you need $75,000? Jimmy Street's in front of you.
You lose your eyesight. You could pay 75 grand for that. Yeah, fair enough.
Jimmy's come to you for his hummus bill, and
that is a lot of hummus for 75 grand. That's a lot of 75,000 baht for Jimmy.
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. I agree. Depending on your income and your situation, I feel a lot of our clients that have children or
depending on 1, 2, 3 plus and their incomes, etc.
That does depend on what their cash buffer is. I know Tony and myself like to keep a nice cash buffer there.
What would be your cash buffer then?
Good question is. I always like that 50 grand.
He's almost at
Oh, it's not there yet.
Or Sammy.
Mate, I think you need a strategy session, mate. I'm going to send you the links.
I think it's definitely a comfortability thing. Like it does fluctuate less than that as well, but also,
is it a psychological thing?
I think it's a psychological thing.
Is it from you or Talia?
I think it's a combination of both. And the thing is,
so Luke is saying that he wants that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a degree of that, especially when I was a uni student. Like,
and we also don't have a small portfolio though, so we're not talking like
a couple of properties. You know what I mean? So we're talking like we're talking.
So there's a difference. I think there's a difference as well when it comes to the size of the portfolio, and that's something we always talk about with this stuff. Is
it is very relevant to your position and where you're starting from. Like, he's got a missus, he's got two young kids.
And he's also got a sizable portfolio. So it's like, he's got a different balancing act to me at 24.
With no dependence, nothing. You act like just a fireball bill and every weekend. And you know what I mean? Like flying close to the sun and doing my own renos and just like scrambling everything I can to get my next deposit.
That's a different conversation. That's a different scenario. And I had a different level of risk that I was willing to take on from that perspective.
Whereas Lukey doesn't need to take that same sort of risk on. Like
for Lukey to drop, his 50 grand, I probably, with the size of knowing his size of his portfolio, I probably wouldn't really drop it below 30, 25, the lowest anyway, just to be comfortable, especially with the family position, everything as well. He can't get another property with 20 grand. You know what I mean? So like, if that's what allows them to sleep at night comfortably, they also got
a lot of equity in there. So they're just stripping equity and pumping that back in deals. The 50 grand allows you to sleep at night when you've got a significant portfolio. It is what it is.
And we are joking, right? We are taking the piss out of you at any chance we can.
But it'll always be dependent, situation.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when you look at clients, and I think that's the big big thing for them. Clients that we work with that have 5 or 10 properties, but they have 2 or 3 children.
They like to have a little bit more of a cash buffer. So I feel as though.
But that's also smart, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
well, the thing is, like,
because 20-30 grand isn't going to get you into that deal.
You know what I mean? Like, realistically, and if that is what like keeps the castle together and not being bombed from Osama bin Laden and a wrong decision.
This is, I think, you know what I mean? But dude, we're talking about a family going under as opposed to
keeping an extra 20 to 30 grand for a family to be comfortable and not have the stress as well. That's where it's like it's a different equation. You know what I mean?
I think it's distinguishing between comfortable, because everyone's situation is different, and no one here is judging what you feel comfortable with. And I think you put it well, Sammy, how you sleep well at night.
Knowing that your expenses, in case something happens.
What we're really talking about is people wasting excess capital.
Absolutely. And that's where it's always situationally, once again, dependent on how many they got. If you're buying one property and you're keeping 75
grand there, it's like, what's the point of 75 grand? Yeah, exactly.
So like that's where you got to be aware of it from that perspective. But then again, risk association.
But man, even if you had the family, like if Lukey was he was in one property, I'd be like, mate, you should be straight, like, okay, 20, 25, 30 grand or something, you guys should be sweet. Get the other deal. Let that equity start to build. And then as it gets a little bit bigger, maybe we start to buffer it up 10 grand a property sort of thing. But at this, staying at 50 or 75 grand just doesn't make sense.
If someone's listening to this and they're in a situation where they are got excess capital and they're procrastinating, we did do a really good podcast on
overcoming procrastination.
Yeah.
So
look through the catalog and you might get some value out of there.
I dare say there might be someone listening here
that is falling into that position and they just can't get themselves beyond that point.
Agreed. Let's move on from buffers unless
you guys good from buffers.
The final thing I wanted to talk through.
Oh, sorry. I did. What I was going to say is the number that we actually build into deals is 3K. So usually.
And the reason for that is we assume that there'll be something.
In the first 12 months of owning a property. So
if a client comes to us with 60, 70 grand, we want to make sure when we present them the deal, if they say to us,
mate, 70 grand is the max. I've got 5 grand outside of that, 3 grand outside of that. We know that over the first 12 months, they're going to be covered if anything pops up.
But we also put in there in case anything pops up with the building a pest that they might need to fix them.
Okay, let's say I have a 3 grand maintenance buffer, and then
in the building a pest, $1,500 worth of stuff comes up, and
the market's moved. Since we bought the deal, so it being said, and the seller's like, nah, if you want the $1,500, all good, we'll cut it and I'll sell it for another 20 grand. So we have to go through that $1,500
maintenance bill that we know is coming, but we budgeted it for it when we did the deal and we factored it into our valuations.
What it leaves them then is, let's say they do that $1,500 maintenance bills to get rent ready or to rectify what needs to be rectified. They still have $1,500 for something else is undoubtedly probably going to go wrong in the first 6 to 12 months, which happens with every property you buy. Something always happens in that first sort of 6 to 12 months. It's literally Murphy's Law. It happens every time. That is why we have those maintenance buffers there to cover that from that perspective. It's not like we just send out and go, yeah, Simi Sween's not going to be anything. And there's $1,500 and you have to pay for that. And something else breaks and you have to pay for that. We're factoring that into the numbers, which is valued against the valuation. Get a value is what we do from that perspective to keep the
head above water from that perspective.
But you were talking about what about if we put the steroids on trying to get yourself from 30, 40 grand to the 70 grand or to the 50, 70, 80, wherever it is that they want to buy. And you wanted to, I think, talk through some like different themes of boosting that deposit amount.
What are the things you kind of have written down or notes around this?
Well, I think we've all been there where we haven't had enough money and we need to get to the point of the 60, 70 grand. So what you can do is what you can do. And I often say to people,
control the control, right?
Control what you can do. And if you're earning a certain amount of money in your job and that is what you do and you enjoy, first thing is the low-lying fruit. Ask your boss, like, is there scope for you to earn more?
Yeah.
Is there some capacity to
earn more so you can save more?
Asking the question for a pay rise.
A lot of people will be too scared to even ask the question.
We've discussed this many times.
So many times, like a boss will be almost expecting it or waiting for it to come before a year before you finally do it.
It was funny. I was actually having a conversation with my nephew, and he was asking me about different industries and how much money they earn. And it was really curious because he clearly likes money. And I said to him, Lockie, I said, what I want you to think about is how much value you can add first, because that's what will get you more money.
That's where you will get paid.
Yeah. Whatever value, and because he loves football, right? I said, figure about Ronaldo. Why does he earn so much money? Because he gives so much bloody value. He's the only one or two players that can actually
do what he does. That's why he commands the dollars.
So instead of chasing the money, give value.
So for people out there listening, ask for a pay rise.
Try and add more value. Start a side hustle. I mean, there's so many opportunities
To earn more money on the side, whether it's getting another job.
More than I was saying this the other day. Like, we looking around where we are, and like, I think we're going away for a week or something, or a couple of weeks or whatever. And so we look for like a dog walker or it was a dog groomer, sorry, like to wash my hair and stuff. And then it was a cleaner when we were trying to find a cleaner back in the day as well. And like all these different little things. Man, it's so freaking hard to find a new one these days to do anything. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much demand for all of them. With the dog groomer, no one would have touched a bear because she's a 35-kilo German Shepherd. Like,
Oh, we only do the small dogs. Are you kidding me?
man, there's a job opportunity right there. Someone go start a business in the Gold Coast or Palm Beach for washing big dogs, because I tell you, I'm all draining about 8 people and no one would do it.
So there's a demand there for
It
people.
wasn't worth their time.
No, because they're too big. They need the little dogs. Yeah, maybe they could do them quicker. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. That's
You
really
do big and small dogs.
it's like a
dog
big
washing.
dog, small dog, little fiddle.
Well, I think it's a really good point. You know, I think Elon
There's
Musk.
always these opportunities. You know?
Elon Musk is pretty big on it. It's basically like you
For
get
washing dogs.
Probably. You get paid in direct proportion to the problems that you solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more problems that you solve, the more you get paid. It's as simple as that. You know, if you're very replaceable and anyone can solve that problem, there's no value. There's no
sort of compensation for that.
But if your problem solving ability and your ability to do something outweighs what anyone else can do, that's where the value is.
The work ethic. It reminds me, guys, my grandmother, long rest her soul, my nonna,
She always used to say to all the kids, all the grandkids,
what are you doing on the weekend? Why don't you go to Coles or Woolworths and swap the shelves?
work at Papa's kebab shop.
Yeah.
She would say that even if you had a job or if you're studying, she's like, what are you doing?
So the mentality of that generation, well, you did anything. My nonna had, they had 3 jobs.
Yeah.
They worked their ass off to get ahead.
Whereas in our culture, and we're all part of this, is people don't want to do the work. The cushy culture of what we've got, and I'm not dissing anyone, but if you're not in the position that you want to be, ask yourself some serious questions. Are you doing the work? You often say, are you prepared to eat shit until you get the results? Like if you're going out, if you're drinking, you're trying to be a baller and you're spending all the money and you're doing all this stuff to pretend, if that's stopping you, you need to really look at yourself and ask yourself some solid questions, because no one cares. You are the only person that's going to benefit or lose out on your own ego or what is beneath you to get started.
You're the only person that's going to make that change, make that actual shift happen.
When I was trying to start my business, I still remember.
The first year, $18,000 in commissions. And I worked 10 hours a day trying to start this business.
Yeah.
Moved back with mum, living at home. Hardly went out, didn't have any money. And not trying to say that is any special than anyone else, but I knew what it took to get started. So if you're listening out there and you're in that position, what can you do? Focus on that.
Yeah, man. No, I'm with you completely, man. Oh, that's a good story, man. I appreciate you sharing with us. It's so important. One final thing to sign up with that as well, to paint the picture. Jimmy, you and I, Luke wasn't here yesterday, but I was telling a story about the fella that has the Ferraris and everything next door, right? To where where the studio is. A couple of complexes down.
And as we were talking about it, we went for a bit of a walk just to clear the air and get a bit of fresh air. And he drove past. He's just got this nice Beamer, right? He drives past. And we went by and we went in, we had a chat with him. We had a chat with him for an hour. We just kind of chilled. It was good. Switched the mind off. His son rocked up. We go, what's the son doing here? Oh, well, we get him, like he washes all the cars in the complex. Oh, right. I go, this isn't the son that, he goes, no, that son, I've got him up there. He's the caretaker. Like he works as the caretaker for the complex.
One son's like 16. The other one's up to 19. And this dude, I don't know exactly what he's worth.
But I reckon he's a $50 million man.
Like this guy is a baller, but he is a legend. Like
How good a player.
Humble.
The first time you met him,
Such a nice.
you'd meet him. He's in a nice Beamer. You think it's
he's doing okay. Like he's all right. But you go into his warehouse.
$5 million worth of cars, right? But absolute legend. But how's this? How easy could his kids have it? He's got him there washing the cars, and when he's finished from that, hey, mate, don't forget, before you leave, you've got to whip a slip of the front lawn and mow the front lawn.
It's part of a strata, and the boy up top, he's a caretaker up the top. He lives up there with his missus, but he's got to be there at these certain times. Like he's this guy who's probably a $50 million man, and how's that of what he's putting into his kid, making his kids do?
To build that work ethic from young and realize they have to work
for what they get. And they don't just get the nice cars. They don't just get the nice house. They have to earn that right together.
And I was the same when I grew up as well, man.
I was working on the farm when I was a kid. Like we'd be over there.
Super young. School holidays, man. We were in the sheds. We were in the feed bins. We were working. And man, that builds a different breed in you as well. So, man, I think with all these different little things here, like if you can't save your first deposit before you start crying, why me, or oh, it's so hard, or the rest of the sort of stuff. It took me 3 years to make a 38 grand a year, save my first deposit.
How many years of sacrifice and savings have you made to try and get to your first deposit? You've one of these little
side hustles like washing the dogs, or go find something go find something that's
in demand around you in your area
that you could go do for an extra 15, 20 hours a week to maybe make an extra
$1,000 a week or something. You'd be surprised how much these sort of things of a side pay.
Because there's not that many people there doing them. There's a shortage of everything in bloody Australia at the moment. So I'd be encouraging people to go look at it. And whether you're saving for your first deposit or you're trying to build enough capital for another deposit moving forward and all the rest of it, these are the things to have a look
into. Where are the opportunities that I can find to then do it? Don't just cry about a whinge. You'd be just working a job when you're working 40 hours a week. Do you deserve it? And that's a really serious question you need to ask yourself, because
as you build this thing out,
I guarantee is when you put that hard work in, you work that second job. I could never be swayed to thinking of anyone ever saying I deserve
what I've built for myself, because I know how hard I've worked to get here.
Yeah,
exactly, man. And when you build that out and you
go through that process and you eat shit for a while, as you like to say,
it feels mad to have that end result and walk past those cars.
You know what?
Because no one can ever take that away.
100%.
The cars can go,
but that's inbuilt in you. And so what people don't realize is that journey to get them, that is their superpower, is who actually propel them to achieve the big goal.
Yeah.
And no one can take that away. So use it as a blessing. If you don't have the money, start thinking, well, how can I?
Yeah.
What can I do? Find it. There's so many options.
Anyone can do it. Honestly, it doesn't matter where you're starting from, what you're doing. Anyone can do it to make that difference.
Create that extra little bit of income, whatever it is, to get the result that you're really trying to get. So, yeah, man, I think, I hope people took a lot of value out of that, and hopefully at the end it opens their eyes as to some different things that are possible as well.
Yeah, I think we nailed the boys.
And if anyone wants to start a dog washing business for big dogs in Palm Beach,
Sammy's got a client for you.
What would you pay, Sammy? Just to get people juiced up out there, like
what, $400 for half an hour?
I reckon big and small dog washing, Palm Beach.
I wouldn't be paying you $300-400 a year.
Oh, I want to start the silver dog grooming business.
Franchise it.
Yeah, franchise.
I believe you're
Silver
right.
dog. Yeah, he likes it.
I believe you're right, because the dogs that love you, because we're like, you know what I mean, like same time, same breed. Yeah, 100%.
Jimmy will only wash the dogs that look like pigs.
Big dog. He went up to big dogs, the big dog.
Listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you took some great value out of this episode. Big Jimmy, Lukey, thank you for joining us here in the studio, boys. And if anyone took some value out in Sophia, they could pass on to someone else. Maybe they're starting their journey. Maybe you're a parent, you want to send this to your kids, or you're a sibling and you want to send this to your brother or your sister that is trying to get that first deposit together that maybe isn't fully understanding around it. Send it on, share the love, get people thinking, talking, and acting the way that we do about property investing. Until next week, guys, that's another Scouting Australia podcast.